Blessed Holy Trinity, praise forever be to thee.
I'm not one to defend Satan, but he really does get blamed for a bunch of stuff he has nothing to do with. Christians choose all manner of horrendous activities, and then they blame Satan or evil. Okay, well, I can agree that it is his fault that evil exists, but remember that he cannot force us to follow him. He can't force us to choose his path. We do that of our own free will. Abraham stood on that mountain with a knife blade waving over his son, and he could have chosen to take the easy way out. What? Sacrifice Isaac? Oh, I'm sure that God didn't mean that. I mean, his words have to be understood through cultural norms and societal mores, right? That's the way we always understand God's words. I mean, God surely must be saying something like his love for us is so great that he would sacrifice his son, but he would never expect me to sacrifice mine. It's a symbol, a sign, a pious suggestion. Don't be so literal all the time. No. Abraham took God's literal word, and by faith, he did as he was told. He strapped Isaac to that altar, and he raised his knife to sacrifice his one and only son, just as God had instructed him to do. And I am certain that Satan was busy, active, diligently trying to get Abraham to do something other than what God commanded him to do. But Abraham's faith conquered him. Likewise, not only does Satan get accused of doing evil, God gets accused of doing evil. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and blamed God for some evil thing in the world that happened. Hurricane Katrina is one that pops into mind. How could God do such a horrible thing? People call God evil when people die or are injured in a storm. How can a loving God do such things? People call God evil when things don't go the way we planned them. How can God allow people to be hurt or homeless or broke? Well, how can God tell someone to sacrifice his one and only son? James clears this up for us, by the way, in our epistle for today. We don't have to trouble ourselves, see, with judging God. God is the definition of right and good. If God does it or says it, it's right and it's good. And no human being on this earth is equipped to judge him. Not with our limited knowledge and our limited vision. And likewise, if it is contrary to God's command, no matter how right it might seem, it's evil. That's all there is to it. How can anything that feels so right be so wrong? Easy. Don't trust feelings. Feelings are corrupted by sin just like everything else in this world. Trust only God. If God allows you to be swept away in a hurricane or a tornado or some natural disaster, well, it's the right thing to do. If God says that sexual activity outside of marriage is wrong, I don't care how in love you are. Wrong is wrong. See, it has to be. by definition. It's not that I don't think that you guys are all swell people. But when it comes to defining right and wrong, good and bad, I got to go with God. Each and every time, even when I don't like it. But here's one more thing to bear in mind. Just as God cannot do evil, so Satan cannot make you do evil. At your baptism, God gave you the power to choose faithfulness. Now, Satan can tempt you all day long. And he does. He does because he knows that if he does it long enough, sooner or later he can wear us down. But remember that we are by faith more powerful than he. He cannot possess us. He cannot force us. All he can do is tempt us to voluntarily leave God's path and follow him. James tells us that it's not the devil, but it's our own sinful nature that gives birth to sin. It's our weakness of faith that leads to evil desires, to disobey God, and that's sin. See, we, like Abraham, stand on all of our various mountaintops, and we clearly hear God's command. Sometimes, we just don't want to listen. Sometimes there seem to be other paths that are so much better that are available to us. And it's hard to always have to take the seemingly most difficult path. Imagine being Abraham on that mountain, called to sacrifice your one and only son. We all know that he's not going to have to go through it. But he didn't know that. We're no different than Abraham or James's people, for that matter. Perhaps our struggles today are influenced by our times, but still pretty similar. I mean, think about it. God called Abraham to give up his absolute most treasured possession, his son. What is God calling you to give up for him? Some secret sin? Money? Time? Whatever it is you treasure most, God says, hey, give it to me. Because where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. James is calling his people to give up their worldly attitudes towards life. Worldly attitudes that are firmly immersed in the Roman Empire. Because you know what? It does matter how a Christian lives. You're saved by grace, but that grace was not cheap. It was bought with a huge price. The death and damnation of God's only Son. Are you living a life that is consistent with that price? And God is calling James's people to rise above what is accepted as normal. God is calling all of us to be better than average. And in so doing, to glorify him and to proclaim to the world around us what he has done. Are you living a life that points to Jesus Christ in everything you do? Or are you living a life hidden under a basket of worldliness so you won't ever be set apart as a Christian? The devil cannot make you do anything. And God chooses not to make you do anything. So you can spend your life as a lazy Christian who takes full advantage of the gifts of God and does just as little as possible to glorify him. you're allowed to live that life by God. But if you want to be a shining star for him, he empowers you to do that as well. He washes you in the waters of baptism until you are shiny and new every day. He offers the food of his word anytime you want to open the Holy Scriptures. And he feeds us and nourishes us with his very body and blood every week at this altar. The devil can't make us do anything. And God won't make us do anything. But the offer is there for us. The power has been given to us to do great things if we so desire. The power has been given to us to do works that even rival Father Abraham. Please rise for him.